being recorded.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mimi Wu, and I'm with the Nutrition, Education, Training, and Technical Assistance Division in Child Nutrition Programs at the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Food and Nutrition Service. Thank you all so much for joining us for today's webinar on grains ounce equivalence tools for CACFP operators. And as we all know, CACFP stands for the Child and Adult Care Food Program. This webinar is part of Teen Nutrition's CACFP Halftime 30 on Thursdays webinar series. These webinars are typically held on Thursdays, but in honor of CACFP Week this year, we're hosting today's webinar on a Monday. So as you heard Desiree say at the beginning, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available at a later date on the Teen Nutrition website. We will email everyone who registered for this webinar when that recording is available. We'll also receive an email tomorrow with all the websites that we mentioned during today's webinar. If you stay for the entire webinar today, you will also receive an email with a certificate of participation on Monday, March 28th. If you're viewing this webinar with multiple people, you will be able to print a certificate for each person. This webinar is being live captioned. To view live captioning, use the multimedia viewer. It should appear automatically, or you can click on the three dots on the bottom of your screen and then select Multimedia Viewer. Click Continue. You should then be able to view the live captioning. You may use the controls located at the bottom of the Multimedia Viewer to change view settings. If you cannot see the captioning, please use the link in the chat box, which you can copy and paste into a new browser tab or window. So during today's presentation, some web pages will be shared using a QR code. You can use your smartphone or tablet's camera to scan this code, and the web page will appear after you scan it. You will also receive an email tomorrow with all the websites that we mentioned during today's webinar. We will have time at the end of this webinar to take questions. You can use the chat box at any time during the webinar to enter your questions, and we'll try to answer as many as we can at the end. So as we just mentioned, this week is National CACFP Week. So CACFP Week highlights the critical role that the Child and Adult Care Food Program and the people that help implement this program play in national efforts to improve nutrition security. Nutrition security is consistent access to safe, nutritious food that supports optimal health and well-being through all stages of life. We know that the CACFP would not be possible without the tireless work of our state agencies, sponsoring organizations, and program operators who make meals available to millions of kids and adults in our country each and every day. So on behalf of the USDA, we just wanted to take a minute to say thank you for your hard work, not just this week and not just this month, but all year long. So the topic of today's webinar is grains ounce equivalence tools for CACFP operators. Before we dive into this topic, we'd love to hear what your experience is with grains ounce equivalence, and we'll do that using the polling feature in WebEx. So we just want to know if you're currently using grains ounce equivalents at your CACFP site. This is an informal poll, and your answers are meant to just give us an idea of everyone's comfort level and experience with grains ounce equivalents today. So a poll should have appeared somewhere on your screen. Usually it's on the right side of your screen. So in this poll, please select the sentence that best describes if you're currently using grains ounce equivalents. And then after you've picked your answer, you can go ahead and click Submit at the bottom. So your options are A, yes, we've been using grains ounce equivalents for 6 months or longer. B, yes, we've been using grains ounce equivalents for less than 6 months. C, no, but we have received training on how to use grains ounce equivalents. Or D, nope, this is my first training on using grains ounce equivalents. Okay, I'll give you about 3 more seconds here. 3, 2, and 1. And let's see what our poll says. All right, well, thanks everyone. So it looks like we may have a variety of experience levels with grains ounce equivalents in our audience. We know that we have some that have been using grains ounce equivalents for 6 months or longer, and some people where this might be their first training, And then, of course, we have some people who are somewhere in between those two. Well, whatever your experience level, we're so happy to have you here. So as a reminder, CACFP operators are now required to use ounce equivalents when crediting grains. Some states may have chosen to use the FNS waiver that would allow for delayed implementation of ounce equivalents through June 30th, 2022. So if you're in one of those states, you may not be required to use ounce equivalents to credit grains yet. However, the waiver should only be used for the duration and extent that they are needed in response to operational challenges related to COVID-19. The waivers are not meant to be a broad delay in implementation. Therefore, we encourage everyone to implement ounce equivalents as soon as possible if you have not already. So whether or not you've started using grains ounce equivalents, if you're still in need of training or a refresher on this topic, you're in the right place. Team Nutrition has created over 20 resources to help CACFP operators transition to grains ounce equivalents. We have training worksheets, webinar recordings, presentation slides, mobile apps, and more, most of which are available in both English and in Spanish. All of these resources can be found on Team Nutrition's CACFP Grains Ounce Equivalents Resources webpage. The web address is shown on the bottom of the screen. And again, we will be sending out an email tomorrow with all the links that we show in today's webinar, so you definitely will have access to all these links later. This email will go out to everyone who registered for this webinar. Because today's webinar is only 30 minutes, we will not be looking at all of these resources. Instead, we will show you how to choose the resource that might work best for you. If you haven't started learning about grains ounce equivalents yet, you may need to practice using some of these resources after today's webinar. Our team has also conducted several trainings on grains ounce equivalents in the CACFP over the years. So throughout today's webinar, we'll also be answering some of the frequently asked questions we've gotten on this topic. You're also welcome to submit your own questions at any time by typing them into the chat or Q&A box, and we'll try to answer as many as we can at the end of today's webinar. Okay, so let's start with this question that Team Nutrition has heard often. As I just mentioned, we've created over 20 resources on grains ounce equivalents, and while some people like having options, others may just feel overwhelmed with so many choices. So one question we get frequently is, there are so many different resources on using ounce equivalents for grains in the CACFP. Which one should I use? Well, for those who prefer to use printed materials, Team Nutrition's Using Ounce Equivalents for Grains in the CACFP training worksheet is a great resource. This 6-page publication is available in both English and in Spanish, online and in print from the Team Nutrition website. This worksheet includes a grains measuring chart with over 40 items that are commonly served in the CACFP. This chart tells you how much of that item you need to serve based on the age of your participants and the meal or snack you're serving. Grain items are listed alphabetically in the left column of each page, and you can see that outlined in orange on this slide. This chart also shows the amount of a grain you need to make up a ½ ounce equivalent, which is the minimum amount of grains required for 1 through 5-year-olds at all CACFP meals and snacks. This column is outlined with dashed green lines. This chart also shows the amount of an item you need to make up 1 ounce equivalent, which is the minimum amount of grains required for 6 through 18-year-olds at all CACFP meals and snacks. When serving grains at snacks to adult participants, you must also serve at least 1 ounce equivalent of grains. So this is a column that's outlined in orange in the middle of your screen. Finally, the column outlined with purple squares shows that the amount of a grain item needed for 2 ounce equivalent of grains, which is the minimum amount required for adult participants at breakfast, lunch, and supper. So now, as I mentioned, this chart has over 40 grain items that might be commonly served in the CACFP. Later in this webinar, we'll talk about the other tools you can use if you want to serve an item that is not listed on this chart. So to use this chart, first, you find the item you want to serve in the first column. Items are listed in alphabetical order. So if we wanted to serve pasta, we would find the pasta row. Our second step is to find the age group we're serving. let's say we want to serve pasta to 3-year-olds. We would find the 1 through 5-year-old column and follow that column down to the pasta row. Where the pasta row and the 1 through 5-year-old columns meet, that tells us that we need to serve each 3-year-old at least a 1/4 cup of cooked pasta. So this brings me to another frequently asked question we get when we provide trainings on how to use this worksheet, which is, can we serve more than the amount listed in the grains measuring chart? So in other words, if we're looking at the example from the previous slide, could a CACFP operator serve more than the 1/4 cup of cooked pasta to each 3-year-old as part of a reimbursable meal? So let's use a polling question to see how you would answer this question. Select yes in the poll if you think yes, you may serve more than the amount listed in the grains measuring chart. Select no if you think no, you may not serve more than the amount listed in the grains measuring chart. And after you've selected your answer, go ahead and click submit at the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and do that for me as well. Okay, I will give you all about 3 more seconds here. 3, 2, and 1. All right, so as some of you might have answered, the answer is yes. You may serve more than the amount listed in the grains measuring chart as part of a reimbursable meal in the CACFP. So the amounts listed in this chart are minimums, not maximums. You can always serve more. So again, if you're interested in using this worksheet, you can download it or order it at the web address on the slide. We do also have a 30-minute CACFP halftime webinar recording that goes more in depth on how you can use this worksheet. We also have ready-to-go PowerPoint slides that you can use for a training or for a step-by-step tutorial guide on how to use this worksheet. All of these items are available in English and in Spanish from our website. And again, we will email you the link to these resources tomorrow. So as I mentioned throughout this webinar, this worksheet is available in print for free to all CACFP operators and sponsors, as well as state agencies that oversee child nutrition programs. So this means you can order worksheets and then cover up the age groups you don't serve or any foods you don't serve if that makes it easier for you to see the information that's relevant to you. So for example, on the slide, I grayed out the 6 through 18-year-old age groups as well as the adult participant group so that I could just look at the 1 through 5-year-old age group. Feel free to customize this chart as you wish, and then you can post it in your kitchen or wherever you do your menu planning as needed for easy reference. So another question we get frequently is, well, what if an item I want to serve is not listed on the grains measuring chart? Team Nutrition does have a worksheet titled Calculating Ounce Equivalents of Grains in the CACFP, which shows you how to hand calculate the amount of grains to serve to meet minimum grains requirements. So this worksheet is great for those who are comfortable or may even prefer to look at the math behind calculating grains ounce equivalents, or just want to better understand how we came up with the amounts in the grains measuring chart that I mentioned in the previous slides. However, we also know many of you would rather just use a tool that could calculate for you the amount of grains you need to serve. And that's where the Food Buying Guide's Exhibit A Grains Tool comes in. This tool is useful for those who want to use their phones or computers to determine how much of a grain item to serve. So you can use this tool for all age groups and for all grains, including grains that are listed in that worksheet that we just talked about, as well as grains that are not listed on that worksheet. So to use this resource, first you find the item's nutrition facts label and enter the serving size and weight into the tool. The tool will then calculate how much of that grain item you need to serve in order to meet minimum requirements. There are also built-in guides and tutorials that walk users throughout the process step by step. For more information, you can check out some recorded webinars that walk you through the steps of using this Exhibit A Grains tool. Both of these webinars are available on the Food Buying Guide Training Resources webpage. The How to Maximize the Exhibit A Grains tool webinar is available in English, and there's also a version of that webinar that's subtitled in Spanish. So another question we frequently get is, do we have to use ounce equivalents to credit grains in the infant meal pattern? So let's see what you think. Select yes in the poll if you think the answer is yes, you have to use ounce equivalents to credit grains in the infant meal pattern once the infant is developmentally ready to accept grains. Select no in the poll if you think the answer is no. You do not have to use ounce equivalents to credit grains in the infant meal pattern. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and submit my answer here as well. Okay, I'll give you all about 3 more seconds here. So 3, 2, and 1. All right. Okay, so as many of you know, the answer is yes. You have to use ounce equivalents to credit grains in the infant meal pattern. This would apply to the meal pattern for infants ages 6 through 11 months, where iron-fortified infant cereal is an option at breakfast, lunch, and supper. Grains are required at snack once the infant is developmentally ready to accept them. Those grains must also be credited in ounce equivalents. The Exhibit A grains tool that we just talked about will let you know how much of a grain item you need to serve to meet requirements in the infant meal pattern. Team Nutrition also has a worksheet that focuses on feeding infants using ounce equivalents for grains in the CACFP. This worksheet is available in English and in Spanish, online and in print. Just like the other grains ounce equivalents worksheets we discussed, this training worksheet also has a grains measuring chart that shows the amounts of different grain items needed for a reimbursable infant meal or snack. You can view, download, and order this worksheet from the Team Nutrition website. So in addition to CACFP operators who serve infants, we've gotten questions from after-school operators and others who serve single-serving grains, such as snack pack bags of pretzels or crackers, individually wrapped muffins, small bowls or boxes of cereal, etc., at their sites. So these operators often want to know if one package of these items would equal 1 ounce equivalent of grains, or they want to know how many ounce equivalents of grains are in one of those packages. So if you serve single serving packages of grains at your CACFP site, you may want to use our crediting single serving packages of grains in the CACFP worksheet. Just like the 2 other worksheets we talked about, this worksheet has grains measuring charts that show you how many single serving packs of grains you need to offer in order to meet minimum serving requirements in the CACFP. We also have a 30-minute CACFP halftime webinar recording that shows you how to use this worksheet, as well as ready-to-go presentation slides. All materials are available in English and in Spanish, and the worksheets are also available in print. So, as you saw, we have a worksheet with grains measuring charts for children ages 1 and up and adult participants. We have another worksheet with grains measuring charts for the infant meal pattern. And we have a third worksheet with grains measuring charts for single serving packages. We also have the Exhibit A grains tool, which lets you enter information from a grain item's nutrition facts label, and it'll tell you how much to serve to meet minimum amounts of grains required based on the age of the participants you serve, as well as a meal or snack. Many have also asked if we have a list of branded items with the amounts of grains to serve. So USDA does not provide or maintain a list of branded products with serving amounts. However, we know that some states and sponsors may have created these types of lists using products that are available in a certain city or state or region. So we encourage you to check with your state or sponsoring organization for more details. So our next frequently asked question is, where can I find recipes that show crediting information for grains in ounce equivalents? You can find many USDA standardized recipes that show crediting information for grains and ounce equivalents from the Institute for Child Nutrition's Child Nutrition Recipe Box. You can access the Child Nutrition Recipe Box from the Team Nutrition Recipes webpage. Many of these recipes were created especially for CACFP sites. This Team Nutrition Recipes page includes links to CACFP recipes that are categorized by collections, such as recipes for lunch and supper, recipes influenced by multicultural flavors, recipes for adult participants, and more. These recipes contain crediting information, and all crediting information for grains is in ounce equivalents. So on this slide, you'll see one of our newer lunch supper recipes, the taco seasoned stuffed peppers. And this recipe contains a 1/2 ounce equivalent of grains per portion if you're making the recipe for 3 through 5-year-olds, and it contains 1 ounce equivalent of grains per portion if you're following the recipe for 6 through 18-year-olds. So we also always get a lot of questions about how the ounce equivalence crediting will be monitored. This monitoring process will remain the same as you're following now. So monitors will continue to work with CACFP operators to review menus and meal records, identify needs for technical assistance, help operators be successful in meeting the grains requirement, and ensure participants are served the correct amount of grains to support growth and health. Please reach out to your state agency or sponsoring organization if you have specific questions about monitoring or documentation, including questions about what information you need to document, which forms to use, etc. We know this can vary from state to state, so it's best that you check with your state or your sponsor to see what the requirements might be for you. We also always get questions about how to order printed materials from Team Nutrition. So there are a few ways you can do so. You can order from the webpage of the resource on Team Nutrition's website. Look under availability and it will say order print copies. Because so many of our materials are available in English and Spanish, you can click on the language you want to order and it'll take you to our order form. You can then complete the order form and the item will be mailed to you for free within 2 to 3 weeks, although we have heard that sometimes it can be much sooner than 2 to 3 weeks. You can also visit the Team Nutrition order form at the URL on the screen and search for the publication using the search bar at the top, and you'll see that outlined in orange on this slide. On the left side of this page, you can also browse by audience, such as childcare, and you see childcare outlined in the green box. State agencies and sponsoring organizations can also order materials in bulk by emailing teamnutrition@usda.gov with the following information: your name, the name of your organization, your mailing address, your phone number, your email address, the FNS number and publication title, and quantities. And don't worry, we will email you all of this information tomorrow, so no need to try to scramble to write it down today. And finally, we'll wrap up with one last frequently asked question, which is what's the difference between ounce equivalents and ounces? So ounces are a way to measure weight or how heavy something is. 1 ounce equals 28 grams. Ounce equivalents measure the amount of grains in a food. So 1 ounce equivalent of grains equals 16 grams of grains. So if you apply this to the example on the screen, you can see that both the bread and the muffin have 16 grams of grains. Both of these items provide 1 ounce equivalent of grains. However, notice that the bread weighs 28 grams or 1 ounce, while the muffin weighs 55 grams or 2 ounces. If you cut the muffin in half, the muffin would weigh the same amount as the bread, but it would only give you a 1/2 ounce equivalent of grains. So this example shows that grain items can weigh different amounts, but give you the same amount of ounce equivalent of grains. So as you can see, using ounce equivalents gives us a way to make sure that the children and dependent adults you serve in the CACFP get enough grains, no matter what type of grain item you might be serving. So this concludes the informational part of our webinar today, and we'll answer your questions in just a second. After this webinar, we recommend that you visit Team Nutrition's CACFP Grains Ounce Equivalents webpage and practice using the Grains Ounce Equivalent tool that works best for you. As we've mentioned throughout today's webinar, we will be sending you an email tomorrow with all the links that we talked about today, so you'll be getting links to that webpage soon. Additionally, during this month, some state agency sponsors and others are providing training refreshers or hosting other activities and events on using grains ounce equivalents. Some of those actions are posted on our Celebrate CACFP Week with Grains Ounce Equivalents webpage. For more information, please check out that webpage. You'll also want to watch your inbox for a post-webinar email by 5 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow that has all the web addresses that we showed in today's webinar. Additionally, by 5 p.m. Eastern Time on March 28th, everyone who was here for the entire webinar will receive an email with a certificate of participation. If you're watching this webinar with multiple people, you can print out a certificate for each person. Finally, when the recorded webinar is available, we will send an email to everyone who registered for the webinar. This email will provide directions on how you can access some more practice questions based on today's webinar at the National CACFP Sponsors Association website. You can also submit or track continuing education credits with NCA at that link. Finally, if you're a sponsoring organization or independent center, you can sign up to become a Team Nutrition CACFP organization. If you're a center or home under a sponsor, we encourage you to make sure your sponsor has signed up as a Team Nutrition CACFP organization. Enrollment is free, and members have the opportunity to network with peers, share ideas, and receive exclusive promotional materials. And now we'll take some more questions. So on the webinar with me today is my colleague, Katie Hallis, who's also with Child Nutrition Programs. She'll be helping me with asking and answering some of your questions. Hi, Katie.
Hi, Mimi. Great job. Lots of great resources on ounce equivalents. Thank you. So our first question here, we have are goldfish and Teddy Grahams on the first worksheet that you talked about at the beginning of the webinar. Are those crackers on that worksheet?
That's a great question. Yeah. So yes, that worksheet, the using ounce equivalents for grains in the CACFP worksheet. I'm laughing because all of our titles are always so long, but yes, that worksheet does have a row for cracker, fish-shaped or similar, savory, as well as cracker, bear-shaped or savory. You know, we don't use brand names on our product, on our materials, but those two do apply to those types of crackers.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mimi. Next question here. I see popcorn listed on the first worksheet that you mentioned. So it sounds like that using ounce equivalents for grains in the CACFP worksheet. But I thought popcorn was not creditable in the CACFP.
Yeah, that's another great question, also near and dear to my heart because I do love popcorn. So popcorn is creditable as a whole grain rich item in the CACFP, but it may be a choking hazard for children younger than 4. And I will say, you know, at USDA at the federal level, it's creditable, but your state or licensing agency may have different requirements or restrictions, so definitely check with them. And again, because it is a choking hazard, if you're serving kids younger than 4, you might want to serve something else. And similarly, if you're serving older kids who are starting to get braces, popcorns might be an issue for them as well. Also for kids who are 5 and younger, you need to serve 1.5 cups of popcorn to meet the grains requirements at meals and snacks. For kids who are 6 and older, you have to serve 3 cups. So that might be a lot of popcorn, especially for your younger kids. So you could try pairing the popcorn with another grain, such as serving popcorn in a trail mix with cereal and pretzels, or serving popcorn with like a whole grain wrap or sandwich or something like that.
Okay, great. So next question here, and I can actually take this one. So this one says, will ounce equivalents apply to providers who use the family style feeding method, where children serve themselves from a larger bowl at meal and snack time? So for those that are implementing family style meal service, yes, grains ounce equivalents applies to all CACFP sites serving meals and snacks, regardless of the meal service type that's used. So in this example, if the operator is serving meals family style, grains ounce equivalents for the grains component of that meal or snack would still apply. Okay, our last question here, Mimi, is the at-risk supper program grain the same as the adult grains?
So that's a great question. And I'm holding my headphones up because I realized some of the comments were saying people couldn't hear me. So apologies for the awkwardness. But for your question, so for 6 through 12-year-olds, which is the age range commonly served by the at-risk after-school program, as well as 13 through 18-year-olds, the minimum requirement for grains is 1 ounce equivalents at all meals and snacks. For adult participants at snack, the minimum requirement is 1 ounce equivalent. But if you're doing breakfast, lunch, or supper for adults, you're going to have to serve 2 ounce equivalents of grains. So long story short, at snack, the adult snacks requirement matches 6 through 18, but if you're doing breakfast, lunch, or supper, it's 2 ounce equivalents of grains are required.
Great, thank you so much, Mamie. That's all the time we have. So if you can go ahead and close this out, that'd be great.
Sure. So thank you all again for your great questions. If you have more questions or need more clarification on anything we talked about today, please contact your state agency or sponsoring organization. Please do know that we read all your comments and questions as well as comments in the post-webinar survey in order to make sure that our materials keep meeting your needs. So just thank you again for spending time with us today. We hope to see you at our next CACFP halftime webinar on Thursday, May 5th on serving adult participants in the CACFP. Registration for this webinar will open in early April. So thanks again and have a great rest of your day. Goodbye, everyone.